Part 1. Poverty. Chapter 1. Home. It was a hot August day, and the city of Marseille lay burning in the sun. "We shall be out of quarantine today, Mr. Meagles," said Arthur Clennam, as the two men looked over the wall at the city in the distance. "Out today," repeated Mr. Meagles. "But what have we been in for?" "For no very good reason, I must say," said Arthur. "But since we have come from the east, the health officials are afraid we might be sick." "I am sick now," said Mr. Meagles, but with a playful smile on his face. "When I came here, I was as well as I have ever been in my life. But shut up here, I have been waking up night after night saying, 'Now I am sick, now they will keep me here.'" "Well, Mr. Meagles, say no more about it, now it's over," said a cheerful woman. It was Mrs. Meagles who spoke. Like her husband, she was healthy and bright, with a pleasant, homely English face. Her daughter, close behind her, touched Mr. Meagles on the shoulder, and Mr. Meagles immediately forgave Marseille from the bottom of his heart. Pet was about 20, a lovely girl with long brown hair and wonderful eyes. "Now, Pet, my dear," said Mr. Meagles, "go with your mother and get ready for the boat. The health officials are coming to let us out at last." Arthur Clennam, a serious, dark man of 40, watched as Mrs. Meagles and Pet crossed the hot yard and disappeared through a white archway. "Now, Mr. Clennam," said Mr. Meagles, "may I ask if you have decided where to go next?" "I don't belong anywhere," said Arthur. "I was sent away to the other end of the world with my father before I was 20, and kept there until his death a year ago. I have always worked at a job I hated. I am the only child of a hard father and a hard mother. Punishment and terror, nothing gentle anywhere. That was my childhood." The picture made Mr. Meagles very uncomfortable. "That was a difficult start," he said. "Now you must enjoy everything that lies beyond it." Arthur, with his serious smile, shook his head. "Enough about me. Here is the boat." The boat was filled with officials, and as it landed, they came up the steps. All the travellers came together in the yard, and their names were called, and papers were produced and signed. Finally, everything was done, and the travellers were free to go. "I always begin to forgive a place as soon as I have left it behind," said Mr. Meagles. "I expect a prisoner begins to forgive a prison after he is let out." A few days later, Arthur Clennam, newly arrived from Marseille, was walking through the streets of London. It was a Sunday evening, grey and tired. The rain began to fall, then umbrellas appeared, and wet skirts and mud. Arthur went down through the narrow streets, past silent buildings, until he came at last to the house he was looking for. An old brick house, so dark and dirty it was almost black, with long, narrow windows. Many years ago, the house had nearly slid down sideways, and it was now supported by huge wooden posts. "Nothing changed," said Arthur. "Dark and miserable as ever." He went up to the door and knocked. There was a slow step on the stone floor inside, and the door was opened by an old man, bent and dried, but with sharp eyes. "Ah, Mr. Arthur," he said without any feeling. "You are here at last. Come in." Arthur stepped in and shut the door. "You've grown stronger," said the old man, looking at him and shaking his head. "But you aren't as fine-looking as your father, in my opinion, nor your mother either." "How is my mother, Mr. Flintwinch?" "Same as she always is now. Hasn't been out of her room 15 times in 15 years, Arthur." "Can I see her tonight?"
"Yes, Arthur, yes,"
said Jeremiah Flintwinch. Mr. Flintwinch was a short, bald man, and his head and body were bent to one side. Just like the house, he too seemed to be sliding down sideways. Arthur followed him upstairs into a dark bedroom, where his mother sat on a black sofa in widow's clothes. She gave him one glassy kiss and touched his hand with her cold fingers. There was a fire in the fireplace, and the room was airless. "Mother, this is not your old, busy life."
"My world is now this narrow room, Arthur," she replied.
Her hard voice reminded Arthur of his frightened, cold childhood.
"I can't walk now. I haven't been outside this room for years."
She looked towards one corner of the room, where a chair on wheels stood in front of a desk.
"But I am able to carry out my business duties. I am glad of that. It is a bad night. Is it snowing?"
"Snow, Mother? It is only September."
"All seasons are the same to me," she said. "I know nothing of summer and winter, shut up here."
On her little table lay 2 or 3 books, a pair of glasses, and an old gold watch. "I see that you received the watch I sent you," said Arthur. "My father was very worried about it. He wanted me to send it to you as soon as possible. But he only told me about it just before he died."
"No talk about business today," said Mrs. Clennam. "Affery, it is 9 o'clock.
An old woman came forward from a dark corner of the room, and Arthur saw that there was a young girl sitting there too. He did not know the girl, but he remembered the woman well. It was Mrs. Affery Flintwinch, his mother's old servant. Affery brought a plate of bread and butter and a glass of hot water and sugar. Mrs. Clennam ate her supper and then read aloud from her book for a few minutes. As she read, the years fell away from her son, and all the dark horrors of his childhood bedtimes seemed to swallow him up. She shut the book and was still for a time.
"Good night, Arthur," she said.
He touched her hand and left the room. Affery collected sheets and blankets, and Arthur carried them upstairs to the top of the house. Up and up they climbed, through the airless smell of the old house, to a large bedroom. It was full of ugly, broken old furniture, old chairs, an old table, and an old bed. Arthur opened the long, low window and looked out at the forest of chimneys and the red sky.
"She's awful hard, your mother," Affery said. "And he's a hard one too, my husband, Mr. Flintwinch. He tells her what he thinks sometimes. It makes me shake from head to foot when I hear him talk to her like that. Don't you be afraid of them like me, Arthur.
Affery, who was that girl in my mother's room just now? Said Arthur.
Girl?
Said Affery sharply.
Yes, there was a girl. I saw her near you. She was almost hidden in the dark corner.
Oh, her? Little Dorrit? She's nothing.
Oh, Mr. Flintwinch is coming.
At the sound of footsteps on the stairs, Affery moved quickly away to the other end of the room. She was a tall, strong-looking woman, but before her sharp-eyed husband, she was bent and fearful.
Affery, woman, what are you doing?
Mr. Flintwinch called through the door.
Make Arthur's bed! Move yourself!
At 9 the next morning, Mrs. Clennam sat in her chair on wheels. Old Mr. Flintwinch pushed it across the room to her desk, and then he left the room in his sideways manner. Mrs. Clennam opened a drawer in her desk. She took out some papers and began to read. A little while later, Arthur knocked on the door. "Good morning, Mother. Are you feeling better this morning?" She shook her head.
I shall never be better,
she replied. "Can I talk to you about business, Mother?" Arthur asked.
Your father has been dead for more than a year, Arthur. I have been waiting to speak to you ever since.
"There was a lot to do before I could leave," Arthur said. "And when I did leave, I travelled a little to rest. Mother, for some years now, our business has been less and less successful. I am sorry to cause you disappointment, but I have decided to leave. I have worked for the business for half my life, and I've never before done anything against your wishes. I ask you to remember that." Mrs. Clennam waited.
Have you finished, Arthur?
"No, Mother. I have something more to say. It has been on my mind, night and day, for a long time. It is far more difficult to say than what I have said." Mrs. Clennam took her hands from the desk and looked at the fire. Arthur continued slowly. "You were always stronger than my father. You sent him to China in order to take care of the business there while you took care of it here. You decided that I would stay here with you until my 20th year and then go to him." He lowered his voice and said with difficulty, "I want to ask you, Mother, whether you ever suspected—" At the word suspected, Mrs. Clennam turned her eyes on her son with a fierce frown and then looked back at the fire. "Whether you suspected that there was some secret that caused trouble in Father's mind, that made him feel guilty." Again, Arthur paused, but his mother said nothing. "Is it possible, Mother?" he whispered, putting his hand nervously on her desk. "Is it possible that Father had done something wrong to somebody?" Arthur stopped, hoping that his mother would speak. Mrs. Clennam looked at him angrily, but gave him no reply. "Remember, Mother, I saw his face when he gave me the watch. He tried to write something to you, but he was too weak. You can help me to discover the truth. Will you, Mother? If we owe money to anyone, let us find out and give the money back." Suddenly, Mrs. Clennam turned and rang a bell on the wall. In a moment, Mr. Flintwinch stood at the door.
Flintwinch, look at my son. He has only just arrived, and now he is accusing his father of wrongdoing. He suspects that our money is stolen money." She was breathing quickly, but although she was terribly angry, her voice was low and clear. "Yes, it's easy for you, Arthur, fresh from travelling the world and living a life of pleasure. But look at me, in prison, in this room, in this chair. I have suffered without complaining for 15 years. She pointed at her son. "Arthur, I tell you now, if you ever talk about this again, I will send you out through that doorway and never see you or know you again." Old Mr. Flintwinch came across the room and stood beside Mrs. Clennam. "You suspect your own father, Arthur," he said. "You have no right to suspect him of any wrongdoing." "My son is leaving the business, Jeremiah," said Mrs. Clennam. "You will now be my partner in the business, and we shall swim or drown with it." The old man looked at Arthur, his eyes shining. "Thank you, Mrs. Clennam. I will never leave you, and Affery will never leave you either. Now, 12 o'clock. Time for your lunch." Mr. Flintwinch rang the bell, and the girl Arthur had seen the night before appeared with Mrs. Clennam's lunch. Arthur now had the chance to look at her. She was about 22, wearing a plain, shabby dress. She was so little and shy that she looked like a child, but there was too much anxiety in her face for a young girl. It was so dull and dark at Mrs. Clennam's house that after a few days, Arthur told his mother that he was going to stay at a hotel nearby. For a fortnight, he came every day to go through business papers and books with his mother and her new business partner. He saw little Dorrit every day, sitting in a corner, her head bent over her sewing, her hands working quickly and busily. She worked almost every day from 8 o'clock in the morning until 8 o'clock in the evening, and was given lunch in the middle of the day. Arthur noticed that she always wanted to eat alone. She said that she was too busy to eat in the kitchen with Mrs. Flintwinch. As he watched little Dorrit day after day, Arthur became curious about her. He began to wonder if she was connected with his father's secret. He decided to find out about little Dorrit and learn more of her story. Chapter 2. The Child of the Marshalsea. Not far from London Bridge, behind high walls with fierce iron spikes on the top, stood the Marshalsea prison. 23 years before, Mr. William Dorrit had passed through its gates for the first time when his business failed and he lost all his money. Most prisoners left the Marshalsea after a few months, but Mr. Dorrit was unable to pay his debts and lived year after year in the prison, until the other prisoners began to call him the father of the Marshalsea. Mr. Dorrit's wife, his daughter Fanny, and his son Tip had come to live in the prison with him, and his younger daughter, Amy, was born there. But when Amy was only 8 years old, her mother died. Fanny became a wild girl, and Tip lazy. He went from job to job, saying that he was tired of everything,
and at last became a debtor at the prison himself. But something in Amy, patient and serious, made her want to be useful for the family. She knew well that her father, who was so broken that he was the father of the Marshalsea, could be no father to his own children. And so she learned to sew and began to go out to work. This child of the Marshalsea grew into a woman, with no friend to help her, and soon became the head of the fallen Dorrit family. This, then, was the life of Amy, known to all as Little Dorrit, who was now going home from Mrs. Clennam's house on a dull September evening, watched from a distance by Arthur Clennam. She walked through the darkening streets and across London Bridge, then turned in through the heavy wooden gate of the Marshalsea. Arthur stood in the street outside and waited to ask someone what the place was. A few people had already walked past him, too busy to stop, when an old man came slowly along the street and stopped to go through the gate. He was dirtily and poorly dressed in an old coat, once blue, which reached to his ankles and buttoned to his chin. He wore a broken old hat over a confusion of grey hair, and his trousers were so long and loose, and his shoes so large, that he moved slowly along like an elephant. "Excuse me, sir," Arthur said. "What is this place?" The old man stopped and looked at Arthur with weak grey eyes. "This place?" replied the old man. "This is the Marshalsea." "The debtors' prison. Can anyone go in and visit the prisoners?" "Anyone can go in," said the old man, adding plainly, "but not everyone can go out." "May I ask you one more question?" said Arthur. "Do you know the name Dorrit here?" "My name, sir," replied the old man, most unexpectedly, "is Dorrit." Arthur took off his hat. "May I just say a few words? I was not expecting this at all. I have recently come home after many years abroad. I have seen at my mother's, Mrs. Clennam's, a young woman working who is spoken of only as Little Dorrit. I have felt sincerely interested in her and have wanted very much to know something more about her. I saw her go in at that gate, not a minute before you came." "Then you must come with me," said the old man, in a weak and trembling voice. "The young woman whom you saw go in here is my brother's child, Amy. My brother is William Dorrit. I am Frederick. I am a musician at a theatre, and I help my brother as much as I can." He went through the gate and across the yard, and Arthur walked with him. "My brother," said the old man, "has been here many years. Please say nothing about my niece working for your mother." The night was now dark, and the prison lamps in the yard and the candles in the prison windows did not seem to make it lighter. A few people stood about, talking quietly, but most of the prisoners were inside. Frederick Dorrit turned in at one of the doors, went up the stairs, and paused for a moment before opening a door on the second floor. At once, Arthur saw Little Dorrit, and at once he understood why she always ate her dinner alone at his mother's house. She had brought the meat home and was warming it over the fire for her father. Her father, wearing an old grey gown and a black cap, sat at the table waiting for his supper. There was a clean cloth on the table, with a knife, fork and spoon, salt and a glass on it. Little Dorrit looked up, and her face turned pale.
"This gentleman is Mr. Clennam, son of Amy's friend," Frederick told his brother. "He was at the gate and wanted to come and greet you."
He turned to Arthur.
"This is my brother William, sir."
"I have great respect for your daughter," said Arthur, unsure what to say. "That is why I wanted to meet you." But Mr. Dorrit accepted the visitor easily.
"Mr. Clennam, you are welcome, sir. Please, sit down." His voice was soft but proud. "I have welcomed many gentlemen to these walls. Perhaps my daughter Amy has mentioned that I am the father of this place. You know, I am sure, that my daughter Amy was born here. A good girl, sir, a dear girl. For many years, a comfort and support to me. Amy, my dear, put the dish on the table. Will you join me, sir?"
"Thank you," said Arthur. "Nothing for me." Arthur was astonished at the man's manner. He did not seem to think that talking so freely about the family history might make his daughter feel uncomfortable. Little Dorrit filled her father's glass with water, put his supper on the table, and sat down beside him while he ate. The way she looked at her father, half proud of him, half ashamed of him, all loving, went deep into Arthur's heart.
"Everyone who comes to the Marshalsea visits me, as many as 40 or 50 in a day," said Mr. Dorrit, anxiously pushing his knife and fork around his plate. "You must know, Mr. Clennam," went on the father of the Marshalsea, "that sometimes people who come here offer a little something to the father of the place."
Little Dorrit looked down and put her hand anxiously on her father's arm. Mr. Dorrit's voice was still soft, but it became more hesitant.
"It is generally money, and it is often acceptable. Yes, very acceptable. Only last month a gentleman visited me and offered me 2 guineas.
Arthur was wondering what to say when a bell began to ring and footsteps came up to the door. A pretty woman and a young man stood there.
"Mr. Clennam, this is Fanny, my older daughter, and my son Tip," said Mr. Dorrit. "The bell is a signal for visitors to leave the prison, and so they have come to say good night."
"I only want my clean dress from Amy," said Fanny.
"And I want my clothes," said Tip. Little Dorrit opened a drawer and brought out 2 little piles of clothes, which she gave to her brother and sister.
"Mended?"
Arthur heard the sister ask in a whisper.
"Yes,"
answered Little Dorrit. While they were talking, Arthur stood up and looked around the room. Although it was small and poorly furnished, it was neat and even comfortable. Everything in it was shabby but clean. The bell went on ringing, and Fanny hurried out of the room.
"Now, Mr. Clennam," said Frederick as he followed her, "we must go quickly, sir, or we will be locked inside."
Little Dorrit had left the room after the others, and Arthur now turned to the father of the Marshalsea and put something into his hand.
"Mr. Clennam," said the father, "I am deeply...
But Arthur had gone downstairs with great speed. He saw Little Dorrit by the gate. "Please forgive me," he said, "for speaking to you here. Please forgive me for coming here at all. I followed you tonight because I want to help you and your family in some way. I could not speak to you at my mother's house." Little Dorrit looked a little afraid. "You are very good, sir, but I wish you hadn't followed me. Mrs. Clennam has been very kind to give me work, and I don't want to have a secret from her."
"Have you known my mother long?" asked Arthur.
2 years, I think. We have a friend, father and I, Mr. Plornish. I wrote out notices which said that I was available for sewing work, and Mr. Plornish gave them to people for me. That's how your mother found me. She doesn't know that I live in the prison." Little Dorrit was trembling and anxious. The bell stopped ringing. "You must go, sir. The gate will be locked." And she turned away to go back to her father. That night, as Arthur tried to sleep, he wondered if his mother had a reason for helping Little Dorrit. Perhaps something she or his father had done had made William Dorrit fall so low. Was this the secret that had made his father feel guilty? The next day, Arthur went again to the Marshalsea prison and walked up and down outside the tall walls, waiting for the gate to open. Little Dorrit soon appeared, in her usual plain dress, and with her usual shy manner.
"Will you allow me to walk with you this morning?" asked Arthur.
"I can speak to you as we walk." Little Dorrit looked anxious, but said, "If you wish." The morning was windy, and the streets were miserably muddy, but no rain fell as they walked. Little Dorrit seemed so young in Arthur's eyes that at times he thought of her almost as a child. "You spoke so sincerely last night, sir, and I found afterwards that you had been so generous to my father. I want to thank you, and I want to say to you—" She hesitated and trembled, and tears rose in her eyes. "To say to me—" "That I hope you will not misunderstand my father. Don't judge him, sir, as you would judge others outside the gates. He has been there so long." "I will never judge him unfairly, believe me," Arthur promised. "May I ask you a little more about your father? Does he owe money to many people? Do you know who is the most important of his creditors?" "I used to hear long ago of Mr. Tite Barnacle," Little Dorrit said after some thought. "He's very important in the Circumlocution Office." "It can do no harm," thought Arthur, "if I see this Mr. Barnacle." "Ah," said Little Dorrit, shaking her head. She seemed to know what he was thinking. "Many people used to think once of getting my poor father out, but you don't know how hopeless it is. And if he did get out,
Where could he live, and how could he live? He might not be strong enough for life outside the Marshalsea. Little Dorrit could not stop her tears, full of love and kindness, from falling. He would hate to know that I earn a little money. Such a good, good father. Arthur waited for these sudden feelings to pass a little before he spoke. You would be glad if your brother were free. Oh, very, very glad, sir. Well, we will hope for him. You told me last night of a friend you have. Yes, sir, Mr. Plornish. He lives in the last house at Bleeding Heart Yard. Arthur took down the address and gave his own address to Little Dorrit. Mr. Plornish is one friend, he said, and please believe that you have another friend now, too. You are truly kind to me, sir. They walked back through the miserable, muddy streets, past crowds of dirty, shabby people. There was nothing pleasant about it at all. But to Arthur, it seemed a special walk, with that thin, careful little creature beside him. Chapter 3. The Circumlocution Office. The Circumlocution Office was the most important department in the government. Whatever needed doing, the Circumlocution Office knew best how not to do it. All the business of the country went into the Circumlocution Office, but most business never came out. A few days after his conversation with Little Dorrit, Arthur found himself at the Circumlocution Office for the 5th time that week, asking for Mr. Tite Barnacle. Mr. Tite Barnacle was the head of this great office. Arthur had already spent one morning waiting for Mr. Barnacle in a hallway, one in a waiting room, one in a small office, and one in a cold passage. On the 5th day, Mr. Tite Barnacle was not busy. This time, he was absent. However, his son, Barnacle Jr., was available. The young gentleman was standing in front of the fire in his father's office. It was a comfortable room with a thick carpet and a leather-covered desk.
Oh, I say, look here, my father won't be in today, said Barnacle Jr. He was a thin young man with a little beard. Is there anything I can do?
Thank you, said Arthur. I met a debtor in the Marshalsea prison, Mr. Dorrit. He has been there many years, and I wish to help him if possible. I want to ask your father if he is one of Mr. Dorrit's creditors.
I say, you must apply to the proper office here, said Barnacle Jr.
Tell me the proper office, and I will go there, said Arthur. Arthur was sent from one office to the next, and finally given a pile of papers to take away with him. He took the papers miserably and walked slowly down the long stone passage that led out of the Circumlocution Office. As he went through the building's front doors, Arthur was surprised to see Mr. Meagles walking out in front of him. He was talking angrily to a friend.
Mr. Clennam,
said Mr. Meagles when he saw Arthur, and his face slowly became more cheerful.
I am glad to see you.
I am pleased to see you too. How is Mrs. Meagles and your daughter?
They are as well as possible. I only wish you had found me in a better temper. Come and take a walk in the park with us, and I will tell you about this friend of mine. He is Daniel Doyce, an engineer and an inventor.
The man was short and square, with grey hair and deep lines in his face. 12 years ago, Daniel created an invention that could be very important to this country. He went to the circumlocution office to tell them about it, and they laughed at him and sent him from one department to another. No one there understands how important it is. He was made to feel like someone who has done something wrong. I am not surprised after my own experiences at the circumlocution office, said Arthur. Doyce smiled. I should not have come here at all. I know of 100 other people who have had the same experience, and I ought to have realised that this would happen. But I am very grateful to Mr. Meagles here. He has supported me many times in many ways. Nonsense, said Mr. Meagles, whose temper had begun to cool a little. Now, come, we won't make things better by feeling annoyed. Let's go back to your factory, Doyce. Mr. Clennam, will you come with us to Bleeding Heart Yard? Bleeding Heart Yard, said Arthur. I want to go there myself, in fact. Even better then, said Mr. Meagles. Come along. And so the three of them walked through the shabby streets to Bleeding Heart Yard. The yard was reached by going down some steps. At one end of the yard stood Doyce's factory, and at the other end there were some tall chimneys and big houses. The houses had once been grand, but were now divided up as homes for poor people. Arthur looked around for the home of Mr. Plornish and saw the name on a sign above a gateway. It was the last house in the yard, as little Dorrit had described it. Arthur said goodbye to Doyce and Meagles and knocked at Mr. Plornish's house. A fresh-faced, sandy-haired man of about 30 opened the door. Mr. Plornish, I have come to talk to you about the Dorrit family, said Arthur. Miss Dorrit told me you helped her. Mr. Clennam, is it? Said Mr. Plornish. Yes, she's talked about you. Come in, sir. Mr. Plornish led the way into a small, dark front room, and when they were sitting down, Arthur began to speak. I know that Miss Dorrit's brother is now a prisoner in the Marshalsea. I would like to pay his debts so that he can be released, but I want this to be a secret. Could you arrange it for me and tell him that his debt has been paid by someone that you cannot name? Say that it is a friend who hopes that for his sister, if for no one else, he will use his freedom wisely. I shall do just as you have asked, sir. And if you can think how I could be useful to Miss Dorrit in any way, I would be very grateful to you. It will be a pleasure, sir, said Mr. Plornish. And, since Mr. Plornish was eager to arrange things as quickly as possible, they then rode in a coach together towards the Marshalsea prison, where Arthur left him before returning home. After he had spent several more days at the circumlocution office, Arthur Clennam realised that William Dorrit's case was indeed a hopeless one. There was no way he could see of helping the father of the Marshalsea to freedom. He thought about this one evening as he sat in his hotel in Covent Garden. Then he began to think about his own life and all he had missed. He had a warm and sympathetic heart, and he felt sad to think about his life of loneliness. An unhappy childhood, long lonely years abroad, and now home to England, he said sadly to himself. What have I found? Just then,
there was a gentle knock at his door, and it opened softly. A voice said quietly,
"Mr. Clennam, it is me, little Dorrit."
The words seemed to answer his question. Arthur stood up and looked at her with his serious smile. "My poor child, it is late, and I have no fire, and it is so cold." He made her sit in the chair nearest the fire, then brought wood and heaped it on. Soon the fire was burning bright. "I always think of you as Little Dorrit," said Arthur. "May I call you that?"
"Thank you, sir. I like it better than any name," she said. "I have come to tell you, sir, that my brother is free. Mr. Plornish says that I can never know who paid his debts, and never thank the generous gentleman."
"He would probably need no thanks," said Arthur. "He would probably be thankful that he had been able to help Little Dorrit a little, because she deserves it so much." Little Dorrit was trembling.
"If I knew him, and I might, I would tell him that he is very, very kind. If I knew him, I would go on my knees to thank him."
There, Little Dorrit," he said gently. There was fruit and cake on the table, and Arthur moved it towards her.
"Thank you, but I am not hungry," she said. "There was another thing I wanted to say. You wrote my father a note, saying you were coming to visit him tomorrow. Please, Mr. Clennam, don't let him ask for money. Don't give it to him. You will be able to think better of him if you don't."
Arthur saw tears shining in her anxious eyes. "If that is what you wish," he said.
"Thank you, sir. I decided I had to speak to you, not because I am ashamed of him," she added, drying her tears quickly, "but because I know him better than anyone does, and love him, and am proud of him."
And then Little Dorrit was suddenly anxious to leave and return to her father. One Saturday morning, not long after this, Arthur set out for Twickenham, where Mr. Meagles lived. Mr. Meagles had invited Arthur to come and stay with him and his family for the night, and as the weather was fine and dry, Arthur decided to walk. He had crossed Putney Heath when he noticed Daniel Doyce walking ahead of him. "How do you do, Mr. Doyce?" called Arthur, catching up with him. "I'm glad to see you." "Ha, Mr. Clennam," said Doyce. "I hope we're going to the same place." "Twickenham? I'm glad to hear it." They walked on together and were soon deep in conversation. Doyce was a man of good sense and confidence, who combined new ideas with patience and hard work. He told Arthur that he had worked and studied with an engineer when he was a young man. He had had a job offer in France and had gone from there to Germany and then to Russia, where he had done very well indeed. When he came home to London, he had worked successfully until he went to the circumlocution office, hoping that they would be interested in his invention, and was sent away. "Do you have a partner in your business, Mr. Doyce?" Arthur asked. "Not at the moment," he replied. "I had one when I first went into it, but he has been dead for some years now. I didn't want to find another partner for a while, but there's more to do now, and I can't manage everything. I'm hoping to talk about it this weekend with my friend and protector, Mr. Meagles."
The Meagles' home was a pretty brick house by the river, with handsome trees all around it, in a beautiful garden. As soon as Doyce rang the bell at the gate, Mr. Meagles came out, followed closely by Mrs. Meagles and Pet. "Here we are, you see," said Mr. Meagles, "in our own home. Not like Marseille, eh? We are delighted to see you, Mr. Clennam, delighted." "I have not had such a pleasant greeting since we last walked up and down looking at the Mediterranean," said Arthur. Then, remembering what little Dorrit had said to him in his own room, he added, "Except once." Mr. Meagles led the way into the house. "Come, you've had a long walk. You'll be glad to get your boots off." The house was as pretty inside as it was outside, and perfectly well arranged and comfortable. The day passed pleasantly, and dinner that evening was very enjoyable indeed. They had so many places and people to talk about, and they were all so easy and cheerful together. After dinner, they had some games, and Pet played the piano. But when the others went up to their rooms, Arthur waited to speak to Mr. Meagles. "I've recently stopped working in my mother's business," he told him, "and now I wish to find a new job. As we walked here today, Mr. Doyce mentioned that he's looking for a business partner, and he's going to take your advice. If you think that I would be a suitable business partner, perhaps you would talk to him about it?" "I like the idea," said Mr. Meagles cheerfully. "I will investigate. You would need to guide him, you know, but you can be perfectly sure of one thing. Daniel Doyce is as honest as the sun. Now good night and sleep well." And with that, the two men went up to their rooms. Chapter 4. Little Dorrit's Admirer. In the Marshalsea prison, someone was in love with Little Dorrit. Young John Chivery was the son of a jailer, and he had loved Little Dorrit since he was a boy. He was a small, gentle man, with weak legs and one eye bigger than the other, but he had a great heart. He hoped to be a jailer like his father one day, and he thought they could be happy together, he and the child of the Marshalsea behind the lock with the world shut out. John's father, Mr. Chivery, knew about his son's love for Little Dorrit, and so he looked after Mr. Dorrit very well. Whenever Mr. Dorrit came into the jailer's room, Mr. Chivery allowed Mr. Dorrit to sit in his armchair and read his newspaper. The father of the Marshalsea, of course, was too proud to see that a jailer's son was in love with his daughter. But he always gladly agreed to sit in Mr. Chivery's chair, and he accepted the presents that young John brought for him. Young John knew that Little Dorrit liked to walk on the iron bridge not far from the Marshalsea. So one Sunday after dinner, he dressed himself neatly in his best clothes and went to find her there. She was standing looking down at the river, deep in thought. Young John watched her for a long time, and then walked on until he came near her. When he said, "Miss Dorrit," she was surprised, and fell back from him, with an expression in her face of fear and something like dislike. It made his heart fall. She had often avoided him before, but young John had hoped that that was because she was shy, or because she knew of his feelings for her. Now, that quick look had said, You? I would rather see anyone else on earth than you," she said in her soft little voice. "Oh, Mr. John, is it you?" But she felt what her face had shown, and he felt it, and they stood looking at one another, confused. "Miss Dorrit, I know that your family is far above mine. I know that my position as the son of a jailer is very low, but I have for a long time, ages, wished to say something to you. May I say it? I didn't intend to upset you today. I would throw myself in the river if it would make you happy for a moment. So I can't say any more unless you allow me to speak." Little Dorrit was trembling. "If you please, John," she said quietly. "If you please, no, don't say any more." "Never, Miss Dorrit?" "No, if you please, never. You are so generous, and I know I can trust you not to say any more to me." "You can trust me," said young John bravely. He was miserable, but her word was more than a law to him. "Thank you, John," said Little Dorrit. "I hope you will have a good wife one day and be a happy man." As she said these words, poor young John burst into tears. "Oh, don't cry," said Little Dorrit. "Don't. Goodbye." "Goodbye, Miss Dorrit." And he turned away and went home through the back streets, his great hat pulled down over his eyes and the black collar of his purple coat turned up around his neck. That evening, the brothers, William and Frederick Dorrit, walked up and down together in the yard of the Marshalsea prison. Frederick, the free man, looked bent, old and weak, while William, the prisoner, stood tall, proud and confident of his position, and for this alone they were a sight to see. "I wish you would smarten yourself up a little, Frederick," said the father of the Marshalsea. "You don't look after yourself enough. You must come and walk in the yard with me more regularly." "Huh," sighed the other. Yes. The prison visitors were leaving as the evening darkened. "Look at me, Frederick, as an example. At regular hours of the day, I walk in the yard, read the newspaper, have visitors, and eat and drink. I have taught Amy that I must have my meals punctually, and Amy knows the importance of these arrangements. You know what a good girl she is." The brothers sighed again. "Yes, William, but I am not like you." "But you could be, my dear Frederick, if you tried." As usual on Sunday nights, prisoners were saying goodbye to their visitors, and here and there, in the dark, a poor woman, wife or mother, was crying with a new prisoner. Many years before, the father of the Marshalsea himself had cried in the shadows of the yard with his own poor wife. But that was a long time ago, and now Mr. Dorrit made it very clear that people should not come and visit if they were going to cry. This Sunday evening, Mr. Dorrit went with his brother to the gate. When he saw them, Mr. Chivery touched his hat a little impatiently. "Young John was looking very smart today, Chivery," said Mr. Dorrit.
I wish the boy didn't spend his money on clothes. It only brings him trouble," said Mr. Chivery crossly.
"How does it bring him trouble?" asked the father.
"Never mind," said Mr. Chivery. "Mr. Frederick going out?"
Mr. Dorrit watched Frederick walk slowly through the door and down the steps. Then he turned and went across the yard again, past prisoners who had no coat, no shoes, and no hope, and up the stairs to his own poor shabby room. There, the table was laid for his supper, and his old grey gown was ready by the fire. His daughter was waiting for him. He sat down, but as he stared into the fire, he began to feel uneasy.
"Something is wrong with Chivery," he said slowly, and his uneasiness grew as he spoke. "He was not as helpful as usual tonight. It's a little thing, but it upsets me, my love."
Little Dorrit put her arm around his shoulders, but she did not look in his face while he spoke.
I think Chivery is offended about something. Why, Amy? He is usually so respectful, and tonight he was quite rude. Other prisoners were there too."
Mr. Dorrit was moving his hands anxiously.
"I might die of hunger if I lose Chivery's support."
For a little while, there was a dead silence and stillness in the room. Mr. Dorrit's supper was cooking on the fire, and Little Dorrit moved to put it on the table. They sat in their usual seats and began to eat. They did not look at each other, but Little Dorrit could feel her father's growing anxiety. He put down his knife and fork with a noise, bit at his bread angrily, and then at last pushed his plate away.
"What does it matter if I eat or not?" he asked, standing up. "It doesn't matter if my life ends now or next week or next year. What am I worth to anyone? A poor prisoner, fed on kindness."
As he rose, she held her hands up to him.
"Amy,"
he went on, trembling violently and looking at her wildly.
"I wish you could see me as your mother saw me. I was young, I was good-looking, I was independent, I was, child. If you could see me in those days, you would be proud."
"Dear father." She held his arm and persuaded him to sit down again, but he went on in the same wild way.
"I do have some respect here. Go out and ask who is the most important person in the place. They'll say it's your father."
And he burst into tears of pity for himself, and at last let her put her arms around him.
"Oh, Amy, my poor motherless child. You would have married a gentleman, and we would have ridden our own horses side by side. You would have loved me more, I know."
"You are the dearest, kindest father," said Little Dorrit. She comforted him with her loving words, and slowly he became quieter. She heated his supper again, and was happy to see him eat and drink. She talked to him about the new shirts she was going to sew for him, and about the new shoes he needed. He never once thought of her dress or her shoes.
"My love, you have had a difficult, hard life here," he said. "No friends, no time for yourself, And many duties, I am afraid."
"Don't think of that, dear," she said.
"I never do."
Little Dorrit never left her father all that night. She sat by the fire as he slept. When morning came, she went down the stairs and across the empty yard to her own room, high up in the roof. She opened the window and looked at the sky. She thought of the sun rising on rolling rivers and wide seas, on rich fields and great forests. And then she looked down into the prison where her father had lived for 23 years. The spikes on the high gates had never looked so sharp and cruel, or the yard so small and dark. Chapter 5. Do Not Forget. Mr. Meagles came to see Arthur at 9 o'clock one morning.
"I've talked to Doyce about his business," he said cheerfully. "He's delighted that you're interested in it and wants you to know everything about it. He's gone out of town for a week so that you can go through his books and papers freely. Then you can decide if you want to become his partner."
They went to Bleeding Heart Yard that same morning, and Arthur began to look at Doyce's papers. It was clear that Doyce needed help in the office, but everything was clearly arranged and carefully noted down, and after 3 or 4 days, Arthur had learned everything he needed to know. He was able to discuss with Mr. Meagles how much he should pay for half the business, and found that Doyce had suggested an even smaller figure. And so, when the engineer came back to town, they were able to quickly agree to become business partners.
"If I had looked high and low, Mr. Clennam, I don't believe I would have found a better business partner," said Doyce. "And I say the same," said Arthur.
So Arthur began his new life, working at Bleeding Heart Yard. And within 2 months, he knew everything about the running of Doyce's business. Raising his eyes one day, he looked out of the glass front of his office, down at the yard. He was surprised to see a short, dark man going quickly from house to house, talking loudly. Then the man came across to Doyce's factory and climbed the stairs to Arthur's office, puffing and blowing like a little engine. "My name's Panks," he said, with his hat pushed back on his ears. His black eyes were sharp, and he was biting the fingers of his right hand. "I collect the weekly rents from Bleeding Heart Yard for Mr. Casby. May I come in?" Arthur nodded, and Mr. Panks took his hat off and came across the room. "Mr. Clennam," he began, "I want information, sir." "About this business?" asked Arthur. "No," said Panks. "About Dorrit." "This is a strange visit, Mr. Panks. It's extraordinary that you should come to me," said Arthur, looking carefully at Panks's face. It was dirty, but eager and quick. "I've met a young lady sewing at Mr. Casby's house. I believe that she also does some work for your mother." Panks paused to bite his fingers again. "I have heard the name Dorrit before, and I want to find out about her family. I think I might be able to help them. I can't say any more than that for now." After a little thought, Arthur decided to tell Panks about the father of the Marshalsea and the long years he had spent in prison because he could not pay his debts. He told Panks about his attempts to help Mr. Dorrit and about the barnacles at the circumlocution office. Now, since I have told you as much as I know, could I please ask that you tell me anything you learn about the Dorrit family? Asked Arthur. Panks agreed. He stood a little while, looking at Arthur, biting his fingers, and obviously fixing in his mind everything he had been told. Now I must go. I have a few more rents to collect in the yard today. Little Dorrit had finished a long day's work in Mrs. Clennam's room and was putting away all her sewing, neat and tidy, before going home. Panks had been visiting, and Mrs. Clennam watched Little Dorrit and then said, slowly and thoughtfully, "What do you know about that man, Little Dorrit?" "I don't know anything about him, madam," she said. "Only that I have seen him here a few times, and at Mr. Casby's house, and he has spoken to me." "Why does he come here to see you?" Mrs. Clennam asked. "I don't know, madam," said Little Dorrit. Little Dorrit got up to go, but as she stopped by Mrs. Clennam's chair to say good night, Mrs. Clennam put out her hand and laid it on her arm. "Tell me, Little Dorrit," she said, "have you many friends?" "Very few, madam." "I believe I was your friend when you had no other. Is that right?" "Yes, madam. Many times, without the work you gave me, we would have had nothing," said Little Dorrit. "Has it been very difficult for you?" asked Mrs. Clennam. She picked up her husband's watch, which always lay on her table, and turned it over and over in her hands, deep in thought. "Sometimes it has been hard to live," said Little Dorrit in her soft voice, "but I think not harder than many people find it." "Well said," replied Mrs. Clennam quickly. "You are a good, thoughtful girl." Affery had come into the room at that moment, and she was astonished to see Mrs. Clennam put her hands on Little Dorrit's shoulders and gently kiss her on the forehead, with a gentleness which Affery had not thought Mrs. Clennam could show. "Now go, Little Dorrit," said Mrs. Clennam, "or you will be late, poor child." Affery followed Little Dorrit downstairs to let her out, and stepped outside the open door. It was a rainy, thundery evening, and she watched the clouds flying fast across the sky. Affery was afraid of storms, but she also hated the house and its strange darkness. So she did not hurry back inside. She was deciding whether to go in or stay out, when a violent rush of wind blew the door closed, shutting her out. "What shall I do now?" cried Affery. "Mrs. Clennam's all alone inside and can't come down to open it." She pulled her apron over her head to keep the rain off, and ran crying around in front of the house. She was bending down to look through the keyhole when she suddenly heard someone behind her. She screamed and looked around. A tall man was standing there. He was dressed like a traveller, wearing a thick, long cloak and a tall hat. He had a long nose and a black moustache. He laughed at Affery's sudden cry, and as he laughed, his moustache went up under his nose, and his nose came down over his moustache.
"Why are you frightened?" he said.
"The wind has blown the door shut and I can't get in," cried Affery.
"Ha! Indeed," said the gentleman. "Do you know the name of Clennam around here?"
"Of course I do," cried Affery. "She's here, in this house, and she's all alone in her room and can't walk, and my husband's out and can't help. What can I do now?"
The gentleman stood back and looked at the house. His eyes rested on the long, narrow window near the door. "Now, madam, shall I open the door for you?"
"Yes, please, and do it at once," cried Affery. "She may be calling me at this very moment, and I'm going out of my mind thinking of it."
"I'll make a suggestion then. I've just arrived on the boat from France." He showed Affery his cloak and his boots, which were very wet, and Affery noticed that he was shaking with cold. "I wanted to see Mrs. Clennam within office hours, but I am late because of the bad weather. I'll open the door if you will make sure Mrs. Clennam will see me tonight." Affery was glad to agree to this suggestion, and the gentleman took off his cloak and gave it to Affery. He ran to the house and jumped up, and in a minute he had opened the window and climbed in. He had strange and frightening eyes, and Affery suddenly thought that if he went straight upstairs to murder Mrs. Clennam, she could not prevent him. But after a moment, he appeared at the front door. "Now, my dear madam," the stranger said, as he took back his cloak, "if you could— Whatever is that noise?" It was the strangest of sounds. A tremble and a low, heavy noise, then the sound of something light falling. "I don't know what it is," said Affery fearfully, "but I've heard it many times." The man's trembling lips had turned colourless as he listened. But at that moment, he and Affery heard a voice from behind them and turned to see Mr. Flintwinch arriving back at the house.
"What's happening here, Affery?" said the old man.
"My name is Rigaud," said the visitor, "and I need to see Mrs. Clennam."
"Mrs. Clennam is my business partner," Mr. Flintwinch said. "Come into my office."
He lit a candle and led the way, in his sideways manner, across the hall to his office.
"Have you not heard about me from Paris?" asked the visitor. "We have heard nothing from Paris about a Mr. Rigaud," said Mr. Flintwinch.
Rigaud took a letter from his pocket and gave it to Mr. Flintwinch. It was an official letter from a trusted agent in Paris, which asked Mrs. Clennam to pay Rigaud £50.
"Very good, sir," said Mr. Flintwinch.
The man's air of confidence had already made him decide that he was a true gentleman. "I should like to see Mrs. Clennam tonight for a few minutes," said Rigaud, his moustache going up and his nose coming down in that most terrible of smiles. Affery took the letter upstairs to Mrs. Clennam, and Mr. Flintwinch lit 2 more candles while Rigaud waited. Then he took the visitor up to Mrs. Clennam's room. "I apologize for visiting you so late at night," said Rigaud.
"You are English, sir?" asked Mrs. Clennam. No, I have no country. I have travelled in many countries, here, there, and everywhere, the visitor said. Mr. Flintwinch made tea, and Mr. Rigo, in his most gentlemanly manner, got up and took a cup to Mrs. Clennam. As he put the cup on her table, he noticed the watch lying in front of her as it always did. "Excuse me for noticing it, but that's a very beautiful watch. May I?" he said, taking it in his hand. "A gentleman's watch. I have often seen these in Holland and Belgium. Now, are these the letters D-N-F? They are difficult to read." "Those are the letters," said Mrs. Clennam. "D-N-F was some lovely, interesting creature, I'm sure," said Mr. Rigo. "The letters are not the first letters of any name," said Mrs. Clennam coldly. "They stand, I believe, for Do Not Forget." "And naturally," said Mr. Rigo, putting the watch back on the table and sitting down again, "you do not forget." "No, sir, I do not forget," replied Mrs. Clennam in her strong, deliberate voice. "One does not forget, living a life as dull as mine has been these years. I neither forget nor wish to forget." She put her hand on the watch and moved it to the exact place on her little table where it always sat. Mr. Rigo listened to her, thoughtfully touching his moustache. "Mr. Flintwinch will give you your £50 tomorrow. I hope your stay in this city will be pleasant," said Mrs. Clennam with her frozen smile. Mr. Rigo stood up to say goodbye and followed Mr. Flintwinch out of the room. He looked in all the rooms with interest as he walked through the house. "I love an old house," he said, putting his long cloak on. He stopped to look at a painting on the wall. "Who is this, Mr. Flintwinch?" "Mr. Clennam, her husband, now dead." "The owner of the watch?" "Yes, Mr. Rigo." "They must have been very happy." "I can't say, I don't know," said Mr. Flintwinch. "There are secrets in all families." "Secrets? So there are. You are right," cried Mr. Rigo, and he threw back his head and burst into laughter. "You will collect your money tomorrow, sir," said Mr. Flintwinch politely. "My dear sir." Rigo took Mr. Flintwinch by the collar with both hands. "I will collect my money. You have the word of a gentleman. You shall see me again." But Mr. Rigo did not appear the next day. Mr. Flintwinch went to look for him at the hotel where he had been staying, and found that he had paid his bill early that morning and gone back to France. But Mr. Flintwinch had a feeling that Mr. Rigo would keep his promise and would return. Chapter 6. The Marshalsea Wall is Down. One morning, Panks arrived at Arthur's rooms very early when he was still in bed. "I think I have made a discovery," said Panks, taking a packet of papers from his pocket. He turned the pages feverishly and then held one out to Arthur. "There, sir," he cried, pointing at it. "That man's your Father of the Marshalsea. He is heir to a great fortune, which has been waiting for him, untouched, for many years. He inherited a great house with land that had once been owned by the Dorrits of Dorset. Mr. Dorrit just needs to sign a few papers and he will be free and extremely rich."
"How have you discovered this?" asked Arthur in astonishment.
"When I first heard the name Dorrit, it meant something to me," said Panks. "So I started to visit Mr. Dorrit in the Marshalsea. When I learned about his family history, I was then able to make my own investigations."
"Do the Dorrits know anything about this?" asked Arthur, smiling and shaking Panks's hand.
"Not yet. I have only today heard from the bank and the lawyers," said Panks, biting his fingers. "But Miss Amy Dorrit will be working at Mr. Casby's house this morning, and I can now permit you to bring this news to the family in the way you think best. The sooner the better."
Arthur, of course, decided to go at once to Mr. Casby's house, and he was shown upstairs by a servant to the small room where little Dorrit was sewing. When she saw the look on his face, she dropped her work.
"Mr. Clennam, what's the matter?"
she cried. "I have come to tell you something, a piece of great fortune." They stood at the window, and her eyes, full of light, were fixed on his face. "Dear little Dorrit, your father can be free within this week. We must go and tell him." Little Dorrit's face was pale, and her heart was beating fast. "Shall I tell you more?" said Arthur gently. "Your father will be a rich man. You are all now very wealthy. Bravest and best of children, my dear little Dorrit, you are now rewarded."
"Father, father,"
was all she could say, before her eyes closed and she fainted onto the sofa. Mr. Casby's servants came and took care of her, but her concern to get to her father and to bring the news to him made her very quickly well again. And so little Dorrit came out of the house with Arthur and went in a coach to the Marshalsea. It was a strangely unreal ride through the old dirty streets and across the bridge. She felt that she was rising out of them into a world of wealth. Arthur told her that her father would ride in his own coach, a great and grand man, and she cried tears of happiness and innocent pride. When little Dorrit opened the door to her father's room, he was sitting in his old grey gown, reading his newspaper in the sunlight by the window. He turned around, surprised to see little Dorrit was home, and surprised again to see Arthur Clennam. As they came in, the look on both their faces made his heart beat faster. He did not get up or speak, but quietly put down his glasses and newspaper on the table beside him. Little Dorrit sat down close to him.
"Father, I've been made so happy this morning. Mr. Clennam brought me such wonderful news about you."
Tears rolled down her face. Mr. Dorrit put his hand to his heart and looked at Arthur.
"Mr. Clennam, What surprise is waiting for me?
Tell me the best surprise you can imagine, said Arthur. As Arthur watched him, Mr. Dorrit seemed to change into a very old man. The sun was bright on the wall outside and on the spikes along the top. Silently, Mr. Dorrit pointed at the wall. "The wall is down," said Arthur. "Gone. Mr. Dorrit, within a few days you will be free and very wealthy. I congratulate you with all my heart on this change of fortune and the happy future ahead of you, into which you will carry your daughter, the best of all riches." Mr. Dorrit began to shake, and little Dorrit put her arms around him. "I shall see you as my poor mother saw you long ago," she told him. "My dear, dear father." But Mr. Dorrit could say nothing. Arthur and little Dorrit helped him into a comfortable chair and brought him a drink. Then, as Arthur explained to him how Panks had discovered the Dorrit's fortune, the father of the Marshalsea sat back in his chair and cried. After a while, he stood up and began to move around the room. "He shall be, Mr. Panks shall be generously rewarded, Mr. Clennam," said the father. "Everyone shall be, rewarded and repaid. I will pay you, my dear sir, everything you have given me and my son. Chivery shall be rewarded. Young John shall be rewarded." He stopped for a moment to kiss little Dorrit. "We must send for Fanny and Tip, and for my brother." Little Dorrit was deeply anxious that her father should lie down and calm himself. But for another half-hour he could only walk around the room, talking. At last, he lay down and slowly fell asleep, tears on his face. Little Dorrit had been sitting by his side, and now, exhausted by her own feelings, she dropped her head on his bed and fell asleep too. Arthur got up quietly, left the prison, and went out into the noisy streets. The next few days were busy. Mr. Dorrit met his lawyers, signed all the papers, and complained greatly about the delay in his departure from the Marshalsea. Many prisoners asked Mr. Dorrit for a few pounds, and he gave generously, although he always wrote first, asking them to come and see him in his room. He gave them a great deal of advice, and hoped that they would remember the father of the Marshalsea with respect. Although Frederick Dorrit showed little interest in the family's changed fortune, Mr. William Dorrit arranged for him to be measured for smart new clothes, hats and boots, and ordered Mr. Chivery to burn Frederick's old clothes. Fanny and Tip moved into the best hotel in the area, but complained that the best was very indifferent. At last, the day arrived when Mr. Dorrit and his family were to leave the prison forever. As the clocks struck 12 o'clock, a coach was waiting at the gate. Not one of the prisoners stayed indoors. Not one of the jailers was absent. All were wearing their best clothes. Near the gate stood Panks and young John with his broken heart. "My dear Frederick," said Mr. Dorrit to his brother, as they left the room for the last time, "give me your arm. I think we should go out together.
And if you could throw a little brightness on your usual manner—" "William, William," said Frederick, shaking his head. "You do all that. I don't know how. All forgotten." "But, my dear Frederick, your position as my brother is now a fine one, and you must try to behave proudly."
The brothers walked down the stairs and into the yard, and Mr. Edward Dorrit, once known as Tip, and Miss Dorrit, once known as Fanny, followed them in their smart new clothes. There were 3 cheers as the father of the Marshalsea went through the gate, and before the noise had died away, the family had climbed up into the coach that was waiting outside. Then, and not before—
"Goodness!"
cried Miss Fanny.
"Where's Amy?"
They had expected to find her, as they always had done, quietly in the right place at the right moment. This going away was, perhaps, the very first thing in their family life that they had managed to do without her. Miss Fanny looked out of the coach window into the prison, and her face turned red with anger.
"Now, I do say, father," she cried, "this is too bad. That child, little Dorrit, is being carried out in that ugly old dress which I begged her to change. And by that Mr. Clennam, too. She is making us all look foolish."
Arthur appeared at the coach door, holding little Dorrit in his arms.
"She has been forgotten,"
he said, pity and blame in his voice. "I ran up to her room and found that she had fainted on the floor, dear child. She was going to change her dress, and then it all became too much for her. Take care of this poor cold girl, Miss Dorrit."
"Thank you, sir,"
replied Fanny, bursting into tears.
"Dear Amy, open your eyes, there's a love. Oh, Amy, I really am so annoyed and ashamed. Why are they not driving on? Please, father, do tell them to drive on."
The coach door was shut at last, and the Dorrit family drove away from the Marshalsea prison.